Hi friends, this is CA Suresh Ahuja, the creator of AHUJA'S magical bank reconciliation. Now the world will learn and teach BRS this way. As all of us know that bank reconciliation across the globe is made in mathematical way. So I call it mathematician's technique of bank reconciliation because in this technique mathematical functions of addition and subtractions are used. So this technique has been in practice for ages. Now I have created a new technique and I call it as accountant's technique, and that is based on accounting principles and equations, which is much easier to understand, and once you understand you can immediately do it just like any other activity in accounts. Further, I have devised and introduced a magical technique for bank reconciliation, which you will see in the next part of the video. So this technique, which is a magical technique, will say a goodbye to the era of mathematical technique of bank reconciliation by addition and subtraction. And I hope that our institute and NCRT and all other educational institutions of the world will now follow my technique of bank reconciliation. So let's have a recap that what is mathematical technique. So globally this technique is being used for several decades. So in this technique, what do? We just create a column for causes of difference between two set of statements. One is the cash book and the other is passbook. So you compare the entries in these two sets and note down the differences, and this is how do you deal with the differences. So I have seen in all the books, all the teachers teaching the same way, that if there is a favorable balance then these items need to be added, and unfavorable then these items need to be subtracted. If it is from passbook balance from bank, then what will happen? And now if the balance is from passbook and if it is a debit balance, then what will happen to each item is really very tough and confusing. So I have devised a new technique, that is accountant's technique. So under this technique you don't have to make four columns, etc. You don't have to bother whether it is the balance is debit or credit, starting balance. What you have really to understand is whether you have been given the balance as per your own books of account, that means the cash book, or the balance given in the question is from the passbook or the bank statement. In both the cases, I have created a situation that irrespective of the balance, these debit or credit balance here in cash book, or irrespective of debit or credit balance in that passbook, the treatment to all the items of reconciliations will be the same, whether this balance is a debit balance or credit, no matter. I have just drawn four columns here. You need to draw only four columns, mean four columns of amounts, two on the debit side, two on credit. What you need to do is one column for deposits here, on the debit side and the other is for amount. That's it. I have created this second debit column just to explain and reconfirm the answer which will be there after doing this reconciliation exercise. Very similarly, one column needs to be here on the credit side also, because in the question you'll be given one balance, whether it will be debit or credit. So that way, so you have to draw only two columns of amount, one in the debit side, the other credit. The two columns on each side here, they represent, that is only for explanation purpose. Otherwise you need only one column. If the balance is from cash book, so one column for debit amount here and one column for credit amount. And irrespective of whether the balance is debit or credit, you start with that balance. Favorable is this is unfavorable because this is a liability for you, so that way you have to start. And similarly here also, that I have explained in some other video. Now coming to my main topic here, AHUJA'S magical bank reconciliation. So in this I claim no additions, no subtractions. Don't bother whether starting balance is from cash book or passbook. So earlier I have explained in accountants reconciliation, I have explained that you have to do it two ways. One is from cash book, the other is from bank book. But in this magical reconciliation you will see that there is only one reconciliation irrespective of any all these things. Okay, so just to recap, what is bank reconciliation? As all of you know, bank reconciliation is a reconciliation or tallying exercise between the balance as shown by your books of account, that is cash book, and the balance as shown by the bank in the passbook. So for this, why do we need reconciliation and what are the items of differences? So these are normally time gap in recording transactions, because there is always, because whatever entry you may make today, the bank may make tomorrow or after 3 days time. Or just say bank puts an entry of bank charges on day 1, so that may come to your notice on day 3 or day 10. So as and when it comes to your notice, you'll be passing. So the gap in recording of transaction, then time gap in completion of transactions. So it is not recording but completion. When you issue a check today, so you have issued a check, so you have done it, so you will just credit your bank account by the amount of that check. But the person to whom you have issued the check, he may present it after 10 days, 2 days, or at least tomorrow. So when he presents it tomorrow in his own bank account, so that check will be presented in your bank account maybe day after tomorrow. So there is a time gap in completion of the transaction. This issue of check transaction will get completed after 2 days in that example. So very similarly, there are other items, you can see them, that what could be the reasons for the differences between the two sets of account. Then how do you do it? Line of action. Then how to reconcile a bank? First, to compare and find out the differences between the transactions as recorded in your own books, that is cash book, and bank statement. Simple. You have simply to tick it out, and whatever is unticked, that means the unreconciled items, you just make a chart of it. And then real exercise of preparation of bank reconciliation starts. Now I'll explain here one thing, that earlier throughout till now a bank reconciliation statement was used to be prepared, as you could see here. Why do we call it a statement? Because it is in the format of a statement and not an account. So the balances are given in various circumstances, then certain mathematical functions are performed, addition and subtraction, and then you arrive at the reconciled balance. But here in my case is an accountant's exercise, so here I call it bank reconciliation account and not a statement. So it is an account. It's very easy for you to understand an account. So this is an account. Then again I have deleted all these two things, whether the given balance is debit or credit from cash book or debit or credit from passbook. No, you don't have to make two, it is only one. So that's why I have mentioned bank reconciliation account from cash book or passbook. irrespective of whether the reconciliation has to start from the balance given in from the cash book or the passbook, whether the balance is debit from passbook, that is favorable, or unfavorable, that is a liability from cash book, that is a credit. Similarly, from the passbook, you don't have to bother whether it is a liability or asset. So as you, but one thing you have to understand, when you, the balance given is from cash book, you have to write it here just as an accountant writes. If it is favorable from cash book, balance is given, that means it will be a debit balance, you have to mention here. If it is given that there is a loan from the bank, that means it is a liability. So on credit, you'll be showing if you are starting from cash book. But if the balance given is from passbook, that is from the bank's books of account, that is bank statement, in that case, favorable balance for you is your deposit into the bank, that means that's bank's liability. So your favorable balance into the bank will be represented on the credit side. That means when the balance is given from the passbook, you have to just step into the shoes of the accountant of the bank and write the balance on the side as the banker writes. Now if that is a loan given to a customer and it is from passbook, so for bank it is a debit balance because it is an asset for the bank if the bank has given loan. So then in that case on the debit side the amount will appear. Now but if there is passbook balance is given and it is a liability or the deposit from the customer, that means it's a liability for the bank and the balance shall appear on the credit side. So you have really to understand that where from and which side to write. If it is cash book, write the way you write as an accountant of your own company. That means asset is debit, deposit is debit, and the loan or unfavorable is credit. But if you are writing as an accountant of the bank, because if it is the balance is passbook, then that case if the loan is there or unfavorable balance is there from your angle, then it is an asset for the bank because the bank has advanced you that loan. It is an asset for the bank, it is debit balance. Now if from the passbook, if the bank is showing a liability, if it is your favorable balance into the bank, that means bank's liability. Your deposit means bank's liability. So balance will be shown on the credit side. So irrespective of whether there is a debit or credit balance in cash book or passbook, you have to write the way I have explained. I have given 4 columns here. Again, as explained earlier, I am giving the second column of amount in the debit side as well as in the credit side merely to explain you the question and for rechecking the answer which we will arrive at shortly. So otherwise you have to make 2 columns on the debit side, one debit and amount, and on the credit particulars and amount. You must remember that earlier in accountant's account, bank reconciliation account, I had given on the debit side it was deposit because it was your account. It was on the credit side withdrawal. But if the balance was from bank passbook, then on the debit side withdrawals are there because it is your withdrawal. And similarly if the balance is credit, so deposits because it's bank's liability. So these are the deposits which are bank's liability. So we had written deposits and withdrawals here, but in this case you don't have to write deposits or withdrawals. This is debit and credit as simple. Okay, now you have to be very cautious here while writing opening balance. One trick I have already explained, that is if it is from cash book, then step into the shoes of accountant of the businessman. Now if it is from passbook, step into the shoes of the accountant of the bank and then write the opening balance on either of the sides. But when you write, whenever it is a cash book balance, then you have to, along with balance, you have to write C under bracket on either of the sides. But if the balance is from passbook, then you have to write P irrespective of whichever side it may be, you have to mention P. I'll tell you later that why to mark the opening balance with C or P. So I hope you have understood that how really to write the opening balance in this bank reconciliation account from cash book or passbook. Then thereafter you have to perform few activities. The step 2 is writing the balance. It is already done. Next, this is already explained by me. Whatever I was explaining, it is written here. Okay, you can go through and take the screenshot that deposit balance with bank. Then the balance has to appear in the debit side and mark it as C. This is from your own books. Okay, the first situation. And the second situation is passbook. So debit and credit, how really to write. If there is a loan or overdraft, so then it will be written on the debit side because it is bank's books of account. Okay, so now the very same thing I have explained in a tabulation also. You can go through and understand now. So next step, the activities you have to perform, that all the items of reconciliation which have been earmarked and identified by you and shortlisted to compare and find out. So you have to write those, and they are already written. So you have to bifurcate them between two categories. One category is do, the other category is undo. Now here do means that you have to pass certain entries. Undo means you have to reverse certain entries. Okay, so now let's come to do's. Now do's are all those transactions, whether debit or credit, which are initiated by the bank, whether correctly or incorrectly, which remain unresponded by you in normal course. Bank charges, bank has levied, you have not entered. This is initiated by bank. Bank has wrongly credited some other party's amount into your account. It is initiated by bank. Bank has credited a UFD interest. Certain customer has directly deposited some amount into your bank. So various types of debit or credit entries might be appearing in the passbook, which are not there in your books of account or cash book. So those entries you need to do. And of course you understand that whatever bank has credited, you have to debit. Whatever bank has debited, you have to credit. So the formula is that do all transactions debit and credit as initiated by the bank, which remain unresponded by you in normal course. So which remained unresponded till now. So debit every transaction credited by bank which is not there in your books. Now it is immaterial whether that was correctly done by bank or incorrectly, because right now we are doing a reconciliation exercise. Okay, so even if there is some casting or posting mistake done by bank, you have to respond. That means you have to do the counter entry. Similarly, credit every transaction debited by bank. It's very simple, I think, that you have understood. So just complete the portion of do, then come to undo. What is undo? Undo is those items which have been initiated by you but they remain unresponded by the bank, correctly or incorrectly. Like you have issued a check, it is not appearing in the bank statement. It is initiated by you, unresponded by the bank. You have deposited certain checks for clearing, you have initiated, the bank has not responded because it has not reached their asset. You have done some casting mistake into your bank account, but that mistake has not yet reached or recorded by the bank. You have done certain other entries, incorrect entries, writing an amount of a check of 1,000 as 10,000 in your books of account. So that mistake of excess writing of that check by 9,000, so that is not responded by the bank. So undo those entries, reverse those entries to the extent they are unresponded. So the formula is debit every transaction earlier credited by you. Just reverse. You had earlier credited whatever you had earlier credited, but that is not responded by the bank. That is not done by bank. Simply earlier credited, now reverse. That means debit. Similarly, credit every transaction earlier debited by you. Whether that was correct or incorrect, it doesn't matter. So long it is unresponded by the bank, and to the extent unresponded by the bank. So this is as simple do's, undo. Do it as you do it normal course. In this reconciliation account, you will see that if you have issued some check, you had credited bank account. That is not presented in the bank, reverse, debit it. You have deposited, sorry, it is the next one. You had deposited certain checks into your bank for clearing. They are still not cleared by the bank. Earlier it was debited, now credited, reverse. So these are do's and undo's. Let's take an example. It is ABC Limited. Okay, so this is ABC Limited. Checks issued, we have just drawn this account, bank reconciliation account from cash book and passbook. Debit, because yes, deposits, you can always write this is your deposit, correct. And this is just as if it is your books of account, but while writing the balance, you have to be smart enough for choosing the side, debit or credit. Okay, so case 1. So in this example, I have given certain reconciliation items along with the case 1 is that there is a debit balance as per cash book, own books, 18,000 debit, and the case 2 there is a 60,000 credit balance. Okay, so I have just drawn 2 columns each side just to explain and reconfirm and recheck the answer. You need to draw only one column for handling this question as far as this item 1 is concerned, option 1 is concerned, and this is case 1. This is for case 1. I have drawn 2 columns for simplification. Okay, so the balance is 18,000 debit balance, so it is from your own books of account. So 18,000 is the debit balance, you have to mark C. Now let's come to each point. Checks issued but not presented, it is done by you, and not presented, not responded by the bank. That means you have to undo it. You had credited your bank account while issuing this check, so what do you have to do? You have to debit your bank account by reversing this check. Undoes, the check has been reversed, check issued but not presented. Okay, this is done. You know how to reverse entries. Second, check deposited but yet not credited by bank, 56,000. This is again initiated by you because you have deposited the check, but it is not credited by bank. It is appearing in your books. So the entry is initiated by you, but it is not appearing in the books of the bank. That means it is unresponded. And you had debited your bank account by 56,000 while depositing this check. Reverse it. Undo. Credit undoes. Credit every entry earlier debited. Okay, so reverse. Checks deposited but not credited by bank, 56,000. Come. Bank charges levied by bank and yet not entered, rupees 1,000. So this entry has been done by bank by initiating this bank charges in its books of account on the credit side, and accordingly this 1,000, and it has not reached your books of account. That means you need to do this entry. In how you will do it? So when you pass this entry for bank charges, you credit your bank account. Simply do this. What is journal entry? Bank charges debit to bank credit, so the bank needs to be credited. Credit every entry debited by bank, 1,000 bank charges credited. Okay, next item, FD interest credited by bank, 20,000, not entered in books. Entry initiated by the bank, not responded by you. Now you have to do it. 20,000. How will do it? It is just going to be a deposit kind of. How do you pass an entry of FD interest? Bank account debit to interest income account or FD interest account. That means you have to debit, do FD interest debited, not debited in books of account, 20,000 rupees. Next comes check for rupees 1,000 entered as rupees 10,000. This is initiated by you. You have entered a check of rupees 1,000 actually issued, but wrongly you have entered 10,000. That means while that this you have initiated this entry. So your initiated entry unresponded by the bank, that needs to be reversed. Okay, so you have to that you have to reverse, undo. Okay, undo this entry because you have done this entry. 9,000 excess credited, bank has not responded, so reverse. So what do you do when you had passed this entry of 10,000? You had credited your bank account. That means now you have to reverse. That means you have to debit your bank account by reversing this entry to the extent of 9,000. So reverse this entry. Okay, so you have to reverse this entry. This mistake committed by you, which is not responded by the bank, needs to be reversed, that is undo. Okay, and to the extent means to the extent it is not responded. You had issued a check of 10,000, so bank has already cleared 1,000 because it is basically a check of for rupees 1,000. So this is one thing which is not unresponded. What is unresponded amount? Unresponded entry and amount is 9,000. So let's go to the next item. Check of ABC Trust. We are making bank reconciliation of ABC Limited and a check of ABC Trust, that is some other party, wrongly debited by bank 5,000. That means this transaction is initiated by the bank, maybe incorrectly. So you have to do it because this is initiated by bank, so you have to do it. So how do you pass an entry of check? You simply credit your bank account. So this is a credit entry for 5,000 in your bank entry. So this check of 5,000 you are crediting ABC Trust's check credit. Okay. Next comes credit balance of own books overcasted 7,000. You had initiated this entry, that means you have to reverse, undo. Now what is which side? Because the credit balance was overcasted, that means you had passed an entry on the credit side by 7,000. Now you have to reverse this 7,000. So undo 7,000 on the debit side. Simple. So this 7,000 is being reversed, that credit side overcasted. Okay. Now next item, income additional EMI for car loan debited by bank 8,000. Bank has initiated that, you have to do it then. And which side you'll be doing? EMI. So bank has debited. That means where do you enter in EMI? What is the entry of EMI? EMI account debit to the bank. So you'll be creating bank account and the category of do. So by that 8,000, so you shall be passing this entry. Okay, additional EMI car loan. So this way you see that we have reached to the last item, income tax TDS on FD interest debited by bank 2,000. Bank has initiated, that means it comes under the category of do. You have to do it. How much? 2,000 rupees. On which side? Because this is a TDS. So how do you pass the entry? Okay, you just debit your TDS account and credit the bank account. So bank has to be credited. Do credit 2,000 rupees in your reconciliation account. So this is credited here. So this way you will find that these entries, you have to fix the initiator, then you have to fix accordingly the person. If you are the initiator, then you have to reverse. If bank is initiated, then you have to do. And bank has debited, that means you have also to debit. If the bank has credited, you have also to credit. If you had earlier credited, then reversal means debit. If you had earlier debited, reversal means credit. So this is so simple. It is all accounting. You don't need to remember these complicated formulas of additions and subtractions according to these various varying balances, and always to recall that which balance, opening balance it was. So do's and undo's are over. So this is the case one. So after doing this, you have to simply balance this account. So we had taken this balance of 18,000 on the debit side. So on the credit side, all these entries after making them 72,000 and this is 60,000. So the balance is 12,000 here. But as I had explained in the opening balance, there you had to remember that the cash book balance has to be written as it appears in your books of account, but the bank passbook balance has to be written on the opposite side, or on the side the bank accountant writes. Okay. Similarly, if you start from C, whatever it may be, if you start from C, the closing balance, whether debit or credit, so if the debit is more and credit is less, that means normally you will balance it as a debit balance. But mind it, it will be P, because you have arrived at a reconciliation balance. It is not your cash book balance. So that will be P, but on the opposite side. Here the balance is 72,000 minus 60,000. That means a credit side is exceeding. That means it will be the opposite. That means P, and the balance will be on the debit side. Okay. This technique of writing down the closing reconciliation will apply in both the cases, whether your starting point is C or P. Okay. You will just recheck it. Now we have arrived at a debit balance. In this example, 12,000 passbook balance debit. This is reconciled balance. Now let us take this as an opening starting point. P, 12,000 debit side. Okay, we start. So all the entries will again appear like this, do's and undo's of the earlier question. They will just appear on the side. They appeared when the starting balance was from cash book. So the cash book starting point, whether debit or credit. So the starting point passbook, whether debit or credit, these entries will, every do will always remain do. Every undo will always remain undo. So you can check this what I have written and try to balance it. Let us try to balance it here. So the total on the debit side is 54,000, on the credit 72,000. So here credit is exceeding. That means this balance will be 18,000. But mind it, this the starting point is P, so it will be C. Now here the balance is credit side is exceeding, so here it will be debit. Now this is the only trick you have really to understand. I hope understood. And this again, this is no trick. This is basically an accounting concept, that if it is a credit balance according to you, that means it's your liability as per cash book, because the opening balance is from cash book. So the cash book is showing 72,000 minus 60,000 credit balance. That means the bank must be showing that credit balance on its debit side, because our liability is bank's asset, our credit balance is bank's debit balance. So that's why here the balance will be P and debit. And very similarly here, when the opening point was P, 12,000, so the closing balance here, credit is again 72,000, 54,000 is debit. According to your books, the balance is 18,000 credit. That means from passbook, sorry, this is passbook balance. So 18,000 passbook, because this is the opening point was passbook and not cash book, sorry. So the passbook balance is has been starting point. So the closing balance, so this the credit balance 72 minus 54 is the credit balance is as per passbook. So once it is credit from passbook, that means it is debit from your cash book. So this is again scientific, no trick. Okay, so now I come to case 2. Case 2 is in the my question was that that when there was a credit balance as per cash book as a starting point. So here a credit balance as per cash book is a starting point, same number of columns, everything same. So magical thing you will find that all do's and undo's are appearing the same way here also. You can check, take screenshot or print and just go through. So the point is that these activities within this area will remain the same. Do's of both sides will remain do. The undo's of both sides will remain undo. All the amounts will appear like this. In all the 4 cases, you can find that in this case, the opening balance is from cash book. In the debit balance, this is a debit balance from passbook. Now case number 2, there is a credit balance from cash book and debit balance from passbook, but still all the items remain the same. You can calculate 60,000 was the opening cash book, that means the closing after reconciled item shall be from passbook on the opposite side. So we find that the total on credit side is 132 minus 42, that means credit side is exceeding according to cash book because the opening point was C. So C was the opening balance. So here the balance is 90,000, but that will be on the opposite side, that is 90,000 P 90,000 debit. Now let us recheck this P 90,000 debit. Let us start here. P 90,000 debit. Put all the entries as we had discussed earlier. Ultimately you will arrive at 132 on the debit side and 72 on the credit side. Okay, so in that case what happens, that the difference is 60,000 on the debit side, that means the starting point was P, so the closing reconciliation point will be C. And on the opposite side, so C is mentioned, which is opposite side. When it is debit balance here, that means it will be credit. So credit 60,000, which is already appearing here. That means you have understood that why do I call it magical. You have to understand this technique, and you don't have to remember even. You must be knowing that if you are bank's accountant, if it is a bank's passbook balance, which side it has to appear, debit or credit. You already know it. Very similarly, here also in the closing balance, when the starting point was C, naturally the closing will be P, and once it is the opposite party, the balance, this debit or credit will also automatically will go on the opposite side. So dear friends, this is the total technique of bank reconciliation, and this is what I have already explained you, that in the opening balance was from cash book, then the closing balance of the bank reconciliation account, I call it account, it's not statement, is the balance of bank statement on opposite side, right? And similarly, when the opening balance was from bank statement, then the closing balance in reconciliation account will be as per passbook, but on the opposite side. This is the total jugglery and this is no jugglery, no trick. It is basically, but this technique of bank reconciliation has been devised by me, and nowhere in the world ever any person, institution, or has ever, or teacher have ever taught or learned, including our Institute of Chartered Accountants, our foundation course syllabus, as uploaded in the website, and all the faculties of accounts across the world who have explained bank reconciliation. They have used the addition and subtraction technique of reconciliation, and this is Suresh Ahuja for the first time have introduced completely magical way of doing bank reconciliation. Don't remember, don't bother. So that's why I claim in the beginning portion of my starting point that no additions, no subtractions, don't bother whether starting balance is from cash book or own books or passbook. You have to write it properly, that's it. You don't have to bother that way. If the balance is given that as per passbook there is a liability, a loan given by the bank, you can always understand that which side you have to write in this ledger account. If that is a loan given by bank, that automatically means that it will appear in the bank's books of account on the debit side. So you have to make it on the debit side, right? And but all these entries will always remain the same. So you can never commit a mistake in passing this. You have to understand that how really to write opening balance, and then to remember, if the opening point was C, then closing will be P. If the opening was P, the closing will be C, but on the opposite side. So this is, dear friends, AHUJA'S magical reconciliation, bank reconciliation. But mind it, this is IPR protected property. So this is a registered copyright all over throughout. So in any country you simply cannot copy it, and you cannot reproduce. You know the law of IPR. You can always forward my things, my channel or my, but at the same time one more very good news to you all, that I'll be giving the very similar ways, very fantastic techniques of very complicated problems of accounts, financial management, cost accounts, etc. in the times to come. And get subscribe my channel, Sunshine Students Foundation, where you found this YouTube video. Okay, you simply subscribe, and then you will find that you are getting very continuously something very fantastic. Okay, this is my channel. At the very beginning I had already shown you, right? This is my mail ID, foundation's mail ID, and this is my personal mail ID. Okay, thank you.